Hello, everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
The phone call that changed everything. Picture this. You have spent the last 3 years of your life trying to learn English. You have downloaded every app, watched every YouTube video, repeated every single phrase until your tongue felt like it was tied in knots. And still, when someone speaks to you in English at normal speed, your brain freezes like a computer from 1995. Your mind goes completely blank. The words are there somewhere, floating around in your head like lost luggage at an airport, but you just cannot grab them in time. You smile awkwardly, nod your head, and pretend you understand, while inside you are screaming, "I've been studying for years. Why is this so hard?" And then, just when you are about to give up entirely and accept that maybe English is just not for you, your phone rings. It is your sister. But she is not calling from her apartment across town or from her office downtown.
No.
Your sister is calling from Texas, America. And what she says next will completely change how you see everything you thought you knew about learning English, about love, about culture, and about the human heart. My sister had moved to the United States 2 years before, which was already shocking enough for our traditional Vietnamese family. My parents had cried at the airport. My grandmother had burned incense and prayed to all the ancestors. And my uncle had spent an entire dinner complaining about how young people these days just want to abandon their culture and run to the West. But now, on this ordinary Tuesday afternoon, my sister was calling me with news that would make my parents' jaws drop so hard they would need medical attention. She said, very calmly, as if she were telling me she had just bought a new handbag, "I am getting married." Now, getting married is not usually the kind of news that makes you choke on your coffee. But then she added the part that made me drop my phone entirely. "I am marrying an American cowboy." I wish I could tell you that I reacted with grace and open-mindedness.
But the truth is, I laughed.
I laughed so hard I nearly fell off my chair. I thought she was joking. I thought she was playing some elaborate prank on me because she knew how stressed I was about my English studies and she wanted to cheer me up. I asked her, "You mean like a real cowboy? With the hat and the boots and everything?" And she said, "Yes, a real cowboy. His name is Jake. He has a ranch. He rides horses. He wears a Stetson hat and cowboy boots every single day." My brain simply could not process this information. I tried to imagine my sister, who grew up in the bustling streets of Hanoi, who was terrified of insects, who had never even touched a horse in her entire life, marrying a man whose entire identity revolved around the most American thing I could possibly imagine. It felt like someone had crossed 2 completely different movies by accident. A Vietnamese drama and an American Western. And yet, the more she talked, the more I realized she was completely serious. Her voice was different. It was softer. It had this warmth I had never heard before. She was in love. She was deeply, genuinely, head over heels in love with this cowboy. And that is when something clicked in my brain. Not about my sister, but about me. About all those years I had spent trying to learn English the wrong way. I had memorized vocabulary lists until my eyes burned. I had drilled grammar rules until I could recite them in my sleep. I had forced myself to watch English movies without subtitles and then spend the entire movie completely lost. But nothing had worked. Because I had been treating English like a math problem to be solved, not like a bridge to connect with other human beings. My sister had not learned English by studying. She had learned English by falling in love. And that is the moment I understood the secret that nobody tells you about language learning. You will never become fluent in English if you think of it as a subject. A subject is something you pass or fail. A subject is something you study for a test and then forget once the test is over. But English is not a subject. English is a way to connect with people. It is a way to understand their stories, their dreams, their fears. It is a way to let them understand yours. My sister had moved to Texas with barely enough English to order food at a restaurant. But she had found someone who was patient enough to listen, kind enough to repeat things slowly, and loving enough to help her find the words she needed. And that is exactly what this video is going to do for you. Over the next 90 minutes, I am going to tell you a story. But this is not just any story. This is the story of my sister, of how she left everything she knew behind and built a new life in a place that could not have been more different from where she grew up. It is a story about culture shock, about misunderstandings, about hilarious mistakes, and about the kind of love that transcends language barriers. But most importantly, it is a story that will help you practice your English listening, reading, and speaking in the most natural and effective way possible. You will hear me tell the story slowly and clearly, with careful pronunciation and simple vocabulary. You will see the words on your screen so you can read along. And you will have the opportunity to practice speaking by repeating key phrases and sentences. This is what you have been searching for. This is the method that actually works. Because when you are engaged in a story, your brain stops fighting the language and starts absorbing it naturally. When you care about what happens next, you stop translating in your head and start understanding the meaning directly. When you feel emotionally connected to the characters, the words become part of you, not because you memorize them, but because you experience them. I know you have been frustrated. I know you have felt like giving up. I know you have wondered if maybe you are just not good at languages. But I want you to understand something important. You are not bad at English. You have just been using the wrong approach. Language is not something you learn intellectually. It is something you acquire through experience, through emotion, through connection. Every single day, your brain is looking for patterns, looking for meaning, looking for stories. That is how our brains evolved. That is how we have always learned. Before there were textbooks and grammar exercises and vocabulary apps, there were people sitting around campfires telling stories to each other. And that is how language was born. Not from studying, from sharing. That is exactly what we are going to do here. I am going to share a story with you, and as I share it, you will find that your English improves almost without you noticing. The words will start to feel familiar. The sentences will start to make sense. The sounds will start to feel natural. And one day, perhaps sooner than you expect, you will find yourself thinking in English, dreaming in English, and maybe even falling in love with someone who speaks English just like my sister did. So sit back, relax. Do not worry about understanding every single word. Do not worry about making mistakes. Just let the story wash over you. Let it carry you to a world that might feel strange at first, but that will gradually start to feel like home. By the end of this video, you will not only understand my sister's story, you will understand something much more important. You will understand that English is not a wall between you and the world. It is a door, and all you have to do is walk through it. But before we continue, let me tell you exactly what we are going to cover in this series. We're going to follow my sister's incredible journey from Vietnam to the vast plains of Texas. We're going to explore the cultural differences that shocked her, the misunderstandings that made her laugh, and the moments that made her fall deeper in love every single day. We're going to learn about the cowboy way of life, about rodeos and ranches and real conversations that happen late at night under the stars. We're going to see how she navigated everything from cooking American food to building a family between two continents. And we're going to understand why, in the end, love truly does not need translation. This is section 1 of our 12-part journey. And I promise you, by the time we reach section 12, you will feel like you have traveled to another country, lived another life, and learned more English than you ever thought possible. Because stories are the most powerful tool we have for learning. They engage our emotions. They activate our imagination. They make us care. And when we care, we remember. When we care, we learn. When we care, we grow. So let us begin. Let us go back to that phone call. Let us hear my sister's voice again. She told me his name was Jake. She told me he was tall and kind and had the most beautiful smile she had ever seen. She told me he had taught her how to ride a horse, even though she had been terrified at first. She told me he had learned how to cook pho for her, even though his first attempt had been completely inedible. And then she told me something that I will never forget. She said, "When I am with him, I do not feel like I am speaking a different language. I feel like I am finally learning to speak the language of my heart." And that is when I understood. That is when I realized that my sister had found something that most people spend their whole lives searching for. She had found someone who saw her completely, who accepted her fully, and who loved her exactly as she was. She had found someone who made her feel at home in a place that was not her home. She had found someone who turned a foreign country into a familiar embrace. And as I hung up the phone, I sat there in silence for a long time. I thought about my own struggles with English. I thought about all the times I had felt frustrated and defeated. I thought about all the times I had wanted to give up. And I made a decision. I decided that I was going to change my approach. I decided that I was going to stop studying English and start living it. I decided that I was going to find my own story. And maybe, just maybe, that story would lead me somewhere I never expected. But before I could do any of that, I had to hear the rest of my sister's story. I had to know how she had ended up in Texas. I had to know how she had met Jake. I had to know how she had fallen in love. And most of all, I had to know if boots and a hat could really win someone's heart. So I asked her to tell me everything. And what she told me is what you are going to hear in the next 11 sections of this video. It is a story of courage. It is a story of transformation. It is a story of two different worlds colliding and creating something beautiful. And it is a story that will change the way you think about English forever. So stay with me. Keep listening. Keep reading. Keep practicing. Because the best part is yet to come. And when we reach the end, I think you will realize something powerful. The story of my sister and her cowboy is not just their story. It is your story too. Because we are all searching for connection. We are all searching for understanding. We are all searching for a way to bridge the gap between who we are and who we want to become. And if my sister could do it in Texas with a cowboy in a language that was not her own, then you can do it too. You can learn English. You can achieve your dreams. You can find your own happy ending. All you have to do is keep going. All you have to do is keep listening. All you have to do is believe that it is possible. Because it is. I promise you it is. Now, let us move on to section 2, where we will follow my sister from the chaotic streets of Hanoi to the wide open spaces of Texas. Are you ready? Let us go. From Hanoi to Texas, a leap of faith. Close your eyes for just a moment and imagine leaving everything behind. Every single thing you have ever known. Your family, your friends, your favorite street food vendor, who knows exactly how you like your pho. The sound of motorbikes honking at 3 in the afternoon, the smell of jasmine and rain on hot concrete. Your childhood bedroom with its familiar cracks in the ceiling, your mother's voice calling you for dinner, your father's quiet presence at the end of the day. Now imagine trading all of that for something completely unknown. A place where you do not speak the language, where you do not know a single soul, where the landscape looks like something from a movie rather than real life, and where the only person you have is someone you met online. That is exactly what my sister did. And looking back, I still cannot believe she had the courage to actually go through with it. My sister had always been the practical one in our family. She was the one who planned everything down to the smallest detail. She had color-coded calendars. She made lists for her lists. She never did anything impulsive or reckless. So when she told me she was flying to Texas to meet a cowboy she had been talking to online for 6 months, I thought she had lost her mind completely. I thought she had been replaced by some bold, adventurous doppelganger who had stolen her identity and was now making the most terrifying decision of her life. But the truth was much simpler and much more beautiful. She was in love. And love makes you do things that seem impossible. Love makes you cross oceans. Love makes you learn new languages. Love makes you trust someone you have never even met in person. Love makes you pack your entire life into 2 suitcases and board a plane to a place that exists only in your imagination. The day she left was one of the most emotional days of my entire life. Our parents cried at the airport. Our mother held on to her so tightly I thought she might never let go. Our father, who rarely showed emotion, stood there with tears silently streaming down his face. My grandmother had prepared a small bag of traditional herbs and incense for my sister to take with her, saying it would protect her from evil spirits in this strange new land. And I stood there watching all of this, feeling a strange mixture of fear and pride. Fear because I could not imagine how she would survive in a place so different from everything she knew. Pride because she had the guts to do something that most people only dream about. She hugged each of us one by one, and when she got to me, she whispered in my ear, "I will be fine.
I have a good feeling about this.
And besides, if it does not work out, I can always come back." But we both knew that was not true. We both knew that when you take a leap of faith like this, there is no going back to who you were before. You either fly or you fall. And my sister was determined to fly. The flight from Hanoi to Texas is long. It is painfully, brutally, impossibly long. You fly across the entire Pacific Ocean, watching the sun rise and set multiple times, losing track of what day it is. Feeling your body slowly dissolve into some strange state between sleeping and waking. My sister told me later that she spent most of the flight staring out the window, watching the clouds float beneath her, trying to imagine what her new life would look like. She had seen pictures of Jake's ranch, of course. He had sent her photos of the wide open spaces, the endless fields of grass, the cows grazing peacefully in the distance, the big blue sky that seemed to go on forever. But pictures are just pictures. They cannot prepare you for the real thing. They cannot prepare you for the smell of the air, the feeling of the wind, the sheer overwhelming size of everything. When she finally landed in Texas, the first thing she noticed was the heat. It hit her like a wall. It was not the gentle, humid heat of Hanoi that wraps around you like a warm blanket. No, this was an aggressive, intense, in-your-face kind of heat that made her instantly break into a sweat. The second thing she noticed was the sky. It was enormous. It seemed to stretch in every direction without any end. In Hanoi, the sky is often hidden behind buildings and power lines and the dense canopy of trees. But here, there was nothing blocking the view. Just blue. Endless, overwhelming blue. And then she saw him. Jake was standing at the airport arrivals gate, holding a small sign that said, "Welcome home." He was wearing his cowboy hat and boots, just as she had imagined. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a kind smile. And the moment their eyes met, she felt something shift inside her. All the fear, all the doubt, all the anxiety that had been building up during that long flight suddenly melted away. She did not have the words to express it. Her English was still very basic at that point, but she did not need words. She just walked toward him, and he opened his arms, and she stepped into them. And in that moment, she knew she had made the right decision. The drive from the airport to the ranch took nearly 2 hours. My sister sat in the passenger seat of Jake's pickup truck, looking out the window at a landscape that seemed to belong to another planet. There were no motorbikes, no street vendors, no crowded sidewalks filled with people. There were just open fields and an occasional cow, and the occasional cluster of trees that seemed to peer out of nowhere and then disappear just as
quickly.
Jake talked the entire time, telling her about the ranch, about his family, about his 2 horses named Dusty and Storm, about the rodeo that would be happening next month, about the neighbors who lived miles away but were always ready to help if you needed anything. She did not understand most of what he said. His accent was different from what she had heard in her English lessons. He spoke quickly and used words she had never encountered before, but she did not care. She just listened to the sound of his voice, which was deep and warm, and she felt a sense of peace that she had never experienced before. When they finally arrived at the ranch, my sister stepped out of the truck and looked around. The house was a traditional wooden farmhouse with a big porch and a rocking chair that swayed gently in the breeze. There were horses in the distance. There were chickens wandering around the yard. And there was a dog, a big golden retriever, who came running toward her with his tail wagging furiously. Jake laughed and said, "That is Buddy. He is going to love you." And sure enough, Buddy jumped up and licked her face, as if he had known her his entire life. That night, after a simple dinner of grilled steak and corn on the cob, Jake and my sister sat on the porch, looking out at the stars. And this is what amazed her the most. The stars. In Hanoi, you can barely see any stars at all because of all the city lights. But here, in the middle of nowhere, the sky was filled with them. Millions and millions of stars, so bright and so close that she felt like she could reach up and touch them. Jake pointed out different constellations, telling her the stories behind them. She did not understand all of his words, but she understood his heart. She understood that he was sharing something precious with her. She understood that he was opening up his world and inviting her to be part of it. And she understood that this was the beginning of something extraordinary. As she sat there under the vast Texas sky, my sister made a silent promise to herself. She promised that she would learn English, not just to communicate, but to truly connect with this man and his world. She promised that she would embrace this new culture, even when it felt strange and confusing. She promised that she would not let fear hold her back from the life she was meant to live. And you know what? She kept that promise. She kept it every single day. She kept it when she burned the first batch of cookies she tried to bake because the oven worked differently. She kept it when she could not understand Jake's mother's thick Southern accent and had to ask her to repeat everything 3 times. She kept it when she felt homesick and lonely and wondered if she had made a huge mistake. She kept it because love is not about finding someone who is perfect. Love is about finding someone who makes you want to be better. And that is exactly what Jake did for her. He made her want to be better. He made her want to learn. He made her want to grow. He made her want to become someone who could fully participate in his world while still holding on to her own. That is the beautiful thing about cross-cultural love. It does not ask you to abandon who you are. It asks you to become more than who you were. It asks you to expand your heart, to stretch your understanding, to open your mind to new ways of thinking and being. And my sister was ready for that expansion. She was ready for that growth. She was ready to become the woman she was always meant to be. But let me tell you, the journey was not easy. There were moments of complete confusion. There were moments of total frustration. There were moments when she wanted to pack her bags and fly straight back to Hanoi. But she stayed. She stayed because she knew that something beautiful was happening. She stayed because she knew that the best things in life come from taking risks. She stayed because she knew that love, real love, is worth every single struggle. And as I listened to her tell me this story over the phone, I realized something profound. My sister was not just learning English. She was learning how to be a new person. She was learning how to adapt. She was learning how to grow. She was learning how to love in a language that was not her own. And that, my friend, is what makes her story so powerful. It is a story about transformation. It is a story about courage. It is a story about love that transcends borders. But it is also a story about learning. Learning a language. Learning a culture. Learning how to become your truest self. And if my sister could do it, you can too. You can learn English. You can connect with new people. You can build a life that feels authentic and meaningful. All you have to do is take the first step. All you have to do is be willing to leap. So, what happened next? Did my sister's courage pay off? Did she find happiness in this strange new world? Did Jake prove to be the man she thought he was? And most importantly, how did she go from barely speaking English to building a family in a completely different culture? Those are the questions we will answer in section 3.
Stay tuned.
First impressions, dust, heat, and cowboy hats. Let me paint you a picture that will make every cell in your body feel like it is right there beside my sister on that first morning in Texas. Wake up at 6 in the morning, not because you want to, but because the sun is so aggressively bright that it pierces through the curtains like a laser beam. And there is a rooster somewhere outside that has decided to announce the arrival of a new day with the enthusiasm of a heavy metal drummer. You open your eyes and for a split second you forget where you are. You look around and see a wooden ceiling, a ceiling fan spinning lazily above you, and a window that frames a view of endless golden fields that stretch all the way to the horizon. And then you remember. Oh, right. You are in Texas. You are in America. You are living with a cowboy you met online 6 months ago. And you have absolutely no idea what you are doing. My sister told me that the first morning at the ranch felt like waking up inside a movie. Everything was so different from what she had grown up with that her brain struggled to process it. The silence, for one thing. In Hanoi, silence does not exist. There is always noise. Motorbikes honking, neighbors shouting, street vendors calling out their wares, construction happening somewhere nearby. The constant hum of a city that never sleeps. But here, on the ranch, there was nothing but the sound of wind rustling through the grass and the occasional lowing of cows in the distance. It was so quiet that she could hear her own heartbeat. It was so quiet that she could hear herself thinking. And honestly, that was terrifying. Because when you are in a new country, trying to adjust to a new culture, trying to communicate in a language that is not your own, the last thing you want is silence. Silence gives your brain too much time to think about all the things that could go wrong. Silence gives your brain too much time to wonder if you made a huge mistake. Silence gives your brain too much time to miss home. But then Jake walked into the room with a cup of coffee and a smile, and the silence broke. He said something that she did not fully understand at first, but the warmth in his voice was unmistakable. He was asking her how she slept. He was telling her that he had made breakfast. He was inviting her to start her first full day on the ranch. And my sister, with her limited English and her racing heart, simply smiled back and said, "Good morning." That was the beginning of everything. The first thing my sister noticed as she stepped outside was the dust. Everything was covered in a thin layer of fine, golden dust. The porch, the fence, the truck, even the leaves on the trees seemed to have a dusty coating. She looked down at her shoes and saw that they were already turning brown. She looked at her hands and saw that they were already getting dirty. And she laughed to herself because she realized that she had packed entirely the wrong clothes. She had brought elegant dresses and fashionable shoes and delicate blouses that would be completely useless here. What she needed was jeans. What she needed was boots. What she needed was to look like she belonged in this dusty, wild, beautiful place. The second thing she noticed was the heat. Oh, the heat. In Hanoi, the heat is oppressive and humid, the kind of heat that makes you feel like you are swimming through the air. But this was different. This was a dry, intense heat that seemed to suck the moisture right out of her skin. The sun beat down on her with a fierceness she had never experienced. And there was no shade anywhere. Just miles and miles of open space with nothing to block the sun's rays. She later learned that this was why everyone wore hats. The cowboy hat was not just a fashion statement. It was a survival tool. Jake handed her a hat of her own that morning. It was a beautiful cream-colored Stetson, just like his, and when she put it on, she felt something shift inside her. She felt like she was becoming a different person. She felt like she was stepping into a new identity. She felt like she was finally beginning to understand what it meant to be part of this world. Jake took her on a tour of the ranch that day. They walked through the fields, past the cows that stared at her with curious, unblinking eyes, past the horses that nickered softly as they approached, past the old barn that smelled of hay and leather and something she could not quite identify. He showed her the equipment, the tractors, the tools, all the things that kept the ranch running. He explained how the irrigation system worked, how the cattle were fed and cared for, how the fences needed to be checked and repaired regularly. She understood maybe half of what he said. The rest was lost in translation. But she did not mind. Because what mattered was not understanding every word. What mattered was being there. What mattered was learning. What mattered was trying. And then came the moment that my sister will never forget. Jake brought out his horse, a beautiful chestnut mare named Dusty, and he asked my sister if she wanted to ride. Now, my sister had never been on a horse in her life. She had seen horses in movies and in pictures, but she had never actually touched one. She was terrified. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. Every instinct in her body was screaming, "No, do not get on that giant animal." But she looked at Jake's hopeful face, and she thought about all the risks she had already taken to get here. She had left her country. She had left her family. She had left everything she knew. If she could do all of that, surely she could get on a horse. So she nodded and said, "Yes, I want to try." Jake helped her climb onto Dusty's back, and for a moment, she felt like she was sitting on top of the world. The horse was warm beneath her. She could feel the animal's muscles moving, shifting, breathing. It was alive and powerful and completely different from anything she had ever experienced. And then Jake got on his own horse, Storm, and they started to walk. Slowly at first, then a little faster, then faster still. The wind was in her face. Her hat was pressed down firmly on her head. Dust was flying up around them. And for the first time in her life, my sister felt truly free. She was not thinking about English grammar. She was not thinking about vocabulary lists. She was not thinking about whether she was pronouncing things correctly. She was just living. She was just experiencing.
She was just being.
And that, my friend, is how real learning happens. That is the secret that nobody tells you about language acquisition. It does not happen when you are sitting in a classroom memorizing verb conjugations. It happens when you are in the middle of a real, meaningful experience. It happens when you are genuinely engaged and present. It happens when your brain is too busy processing the moment to worry about mistakes. After the ride, they sat on the porch together, drinking iced tea and watching the sun begin its slow descent toward the horizon. The sky turned orange and pink and purple, a breathtaking display of colors that seemed almost supernatural. Jake looked at my sister and said something that she understood perfectly. He said, "I am so glad you are here." And she said, "Me too." For words.
2 syllables each.
But they contain the entire universe of their connection. That is the power of language, not the ability to speak perfectly, not the ability to conjugate correctly, not the ability to have flawless grammar. The power of language is the ability to connect. The power of language is the ability to share. The power of language is the ability to say, I am so glad you are here, and have the other person truly understand what you mean. My sister's English was still basic at that point. She made mistakes constantly. She pronounced things incorrectly. She used the wrong words. She mixed up tenses. She could not keep up with the fast pace of native conversation. But none of that mattered, because Jake understood her. And she understood him. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. As night fell over the ranch, my sister sat alone on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. She thought about everything she had experienced in just one day. The dust, the heat, the horse, the hat, the man who made her feel like she had found her home. She thought about her family back in Vietnam, her parents who were probably worrying about her at that very moment, her grandmother who was burning incense and praying for her safety. She felt a pang of guilt, a flicker of doubt, a whisper of fear. But she pushed it all aside. She had made her choice. She had taken her leap, and now she was going to see it through. But she also knew that there was so much more to learn, so much more to understand, so much more to experience. The adventure was just beginning, and the challenges were only going to get harder. But she was ready. She was ready to face the culture shock that was inevitably coming. She was ready to confront the misunderstandings that were bound to happen. She was ready to grow into the person she was meant to become. Because that is what love does. Love makes you brave. Love makes you patient. Love makes you willing to learn, even when learning feels impossible. So let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like my sister? Have you ever felt completely out of place? Have you ever felt like you did not belong? Have you ever felt like you were in over your head and had no idea what to do next? If so, you are not alone. That is exactly how my sister felt. And that is exactly how you're going to feel sometimes on your journey to learning English. But here's the thing. Those feelings do not last forever. They pass. They fade. They get replaced by something stronger. Confidence. Competence. Connection. All you have to do is keep going. All you have to do is keep trying. All you have to do is keep believing that you can do it. Because you can. I promise you, you can. So, what happens next? What happens when my sister's limited English leads to a hilarious misunderstanding with Jake's mother? What happens when she tries to cook Vietnamese food in an American kitchen and everything goes wrong? What happens when she realizes that cultural differences are not just about language, but about everything from how you eat to how you express emotions? Those are the questions we will answer in section 4. Stay with me. The best part of the story is yet to come. The culture shock no one warned her about. Let me tell you something that nobody prepares you for when you move to a new country. It is not the language barrier. It is not the different food. It is not even the feeling of being far away from everyone you love. It is the 1,000 tiny, invisible differences that you never even thought about until they slap you right in the face. It is the way people stand too close or too far. It is the way they look you in the eye or look away. It is the way they eat, the way they laugh, the way they express emotions, the way they handle silence. These are the things that no textbook teaches you. These are the things that no language app can prepare you for. And my sister learned this the hard way during her first week on the ranch. The first major culture shock happened at the dinner table. My sister, being Vietnamese, was used to eating with chopsticks. She was used to having a variety of dishes placed in the center of the table for everyone to share. She was used to eating rice with every meal. She was used to the loud, chaotic, joyful noise of a big family dinner where everyone talks over each other and laughter fills the room. But here on the ranch, dinner was completely different. Jake served her a giant plate with a huge piece of steak, a pile of mashed potatoes, and some green beans. Everything was separate. Everything was on her own individual plate. And there were no chopsticks. There was just a knife and a fork, and she had absolutely no idea how to use them properly. She watched Jake cut his steak with such ease, such confidence, while she struggled to even hold the knife without feeling like she was going to accidentally stab herself. She felt clumsy, awkward, and completely out of her element. But she did not want to complain. She did not want to seem ungrateful. So she just smiled and tried her best, even though inside she was screaming. That night, after dinner, she lay in bed and cried. Not because she was sad exactly, but because she felt so profoundly out of place. She felt like a stranger in her own body. She felt like she had lost all the grace and competence she had possessed back home. In Vietnam, she knew how to do everything. She knew how to navigate the streets. She knew how to communicate with people. She knew the unspoken rules of social interaction. She knew exactly who she was. But here, she was like a child again. A child who did not know how to do the simplest things. A child who could not fully express herself. A child who had to learn everything from scratch. This, my friend, is the essence of culture shock. It is not just about missing your home. It is about losing your identity. It is about feeling like you have been stripped of everything that made you who you are and left with nothing but confusion and uncertainty. The second major culture shock was about communication style. In Vietnam, people tend to be indirect. You do not say exactly what you mean. You hint. You imply.
You suggest.
You avoid confrontation at all costs. You use polite language and carefully chosen words. But in Texas, people are direct. They say exactly what they think. They do not beat around the bush. They do not sugarcoat things. And for my sister, this was incredibly jarring. The first time she met Jake's mother, a wonderful woman named Martha, Martha looked at her and said, "You are so skinny. We need to put some meat on those bones." In Vietnam, a comment like that might be considered rude or at least too blunt. But Martha said it with such warmth, such genuine concern, that my sister realized it was not meant to be offensive. It was just how people spoke here. They said what they thought. They expressed their feelings openly. They did not hide behind layers of politeness and implication. Another example happened when my sister was trying to help with the dishes. She was doing her best, but she accidentally broke a plate. She felt terrible. She immediately started apologizing profusely, bowing her head, using all the formal apology language she had learned. But Martha just laughed and said, "Honey, it is just a plate. Do not worry about it." And then she moved on as if nothing had happened. In Vietnam, my sister would have been expected to apologize repeatedly, to show genuine remorse, to offer to replace the plate or do something to make up for the mistake. The social ritual would have been much more elaborate. But here it was simple and straightforward. You break a plate. You clean it up. You move on. No big deal. This directness extended to emotions as well. My sister had grown up in a culture where emotions are often kept private, where you do not show vulnerability, where you maintain a calm exterior even when you are falling apart inside. But Jake and his family were the opposite. They expressed their feelings openly. They hugged freely. They said, "I love you," constantly. They cried when they were sad and laughed when they were happy and never felt the need to hide any of it. At first, this was deeply uncomfortable for my sister. When Jake told her he loved her for the first time, she froze. She did not know how to respond. Saying "I love you" was not something people said lightly in her culture. It was a serious, almost sacred declaration that was reserved for very specific moments. But Jake said it so casually, so easily, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And slowly, gradually, she began to understand. This was not a lack of seriousness. This was a different way of expressing love. A more open way. A more vulnerable way. And eventually, she started to embrace it. She started to say, "I love you" back. She started to hug more freely. She started to open up about her feelings in ways she never had before. But the hardest part of the culture shock was not about food or communication or emotions. The hardest part was the loneliness. Even though she was surrounded by people, even though Jake was kind and loving and patient, she felt profoundly alone. Because there were so many things she could not express. So many nuances she could not convey. So many jokes she could not understand. So many cultural references that went completely over her head. She told me that there were moments when she would be sitting at the dinner table listening to everyone laugh at something, and she would have no idea what was so funny. She would smile and nod, pretending to understand, while inside, she felt like an alien who had crash-landed on a strange planet. This is something that every language learner experiences. The isolation of being surrounded by fluent speakers who communicate effortlessly while you struggle to put together a single sentence. The frustration of knowing exactly what you want to say in your own language, but not being able to say it in theirs. The exhaustion of constantly translating, constantly processing, constantly trying to keep up. My sister told me that there were days when she just wanted to give up. Days when she wanted to pack her bags and go home. Days when she thought she had made the biggest mistake of her life. But she did not give up. And do you know why? Because she remembered why she had come. She had not come to Texas for the food. She had not come for the culture. She had not come for the adventure. She had come for love. She had come because she had found someone who made her feel seen. Someone who made her feel valued. Someone who made her feel like she was enough, exactly as she was. And that love gave her the strength to keep going. That love gave her the patience to keep learning. That love gave her the courage to face every new challenge, every misunderstanding, every awkward moment. Because at the end of the day, love is the ultimate language. Love is the universal translator. Love is the bridge that connects two completely different worlds and makes them feel like one. There is a scientific reason for this. When we are in love, our brains release oxytocin, the bonding hormone, which reduces stress and increases feelings of safety and trust. And when we feel safe and trusted, our brains are more receptive to new information. We learn more effectively. We adapt more quickly. We become more resilient. This is why my sister's English improved so rapidly once she fell in love with Jake. It was not about studying harder. It was about feeling safe enough to make mistakes. Feeling loved enough to keep trying. Feeling accepted enough to be vulnerable. That is the secret. That is the key. When you feel emotionally connected to someone, when you genuinely care about understanding and being understood, your brain shifts into a completely different mode of learning. It stops resisting and starts absorbing. It stops translating and starts feeling. It stops worrying about perfection and starts focusing on connection. So, if you are struggling with your English, ask yourself this question. Are you learning out of fear or out of love? Are you studying because you are afraid of failing, or are you learning because you genuinely want to connect with people? Are you memorizing vocabulary because you think you have to, or are you absorbing words because they matter to you, because they help you express something real and meaningful? The answer to that question will determine everything. It will determine how fast you learn. It will determine how much you retain. It will determine whether English feels like a burden or a gift. My sister chose love, and that choice transformed her entire experience. She stopped obsessing over grammar mistakes and started focusing on communication. She stopped worrying about her accent and started embracing her unique voice. She stopped comparing herself to native speakers and started celebrating her own progress. And slowly, day by day, her English improved. Not because she studied harder, but because she lived more. She engaged more. She loved more. And that, my friend, is the most powerful lesson you will ever learn about language acquisition. It is not about what you do in the classroom. It is about what you do in the real world. It is about the relationships you build. It is about the connections you make. It is about the love you give and receive. So what happened next? How did my sister go from feeling like a complete outsider to finding her place in this strange, new world? How did she navigate the cultural differences that seemed so overwhelming at first? How did she learn to laugh at her mistakes instead of crying over them? And what role did Jake play in helping her feel like she truly belonged? Those are the questions we will explore in Section 5. Do not go anywhere. The story is about to get even more interesting. Learning English through love and misunderstandings. Imagine being thrown into a completely new language without any warning, without any preparation, without any safety net. Imagine having to communicate with people who speak at a speed that sounds like they are competing in some kind of verbal marathon while you are still trying to figure out how to say basic greetings. Imagine making mistakes so embarrassing that you want the ground to open up and swallow you whole. That was my sister's reality for the first few months in Texas. But here is the beautiful thing about love. It makes you brave enough to make those mistakes. It makes you resilient enough to laugh at those embarrassing moments instead of crying over them. It makes you patient enough to keep trying even when everything feels impossible. And my sister's journey of learning English through love is filled with moments that will make you laugh, cry, and nod your head in recognition because you have probably been there too. Let me start with one of the most hilarious misunderstandings she ever experienced. My sister had been in Texas for about 3 weeks, and she was trying so hard to improve her English. She was watching TV shows, listening to country music, repeating phrases under her breath like a little prayer. One day, Jake asked her if she wanted to go to the rodeo. She had no idea what that word meant. She thought maybe it was some kind of restaurant. She nodded enthusiastically and said, "Yes, I would love to go." She imagined a lovely evening at a nice place with good food and perhaps some live music. What she got was completely different. The rodeo was loud, chaotic, dusty, and filled with people cheering wildly as cowboys wrestled with bulls and rode bucking horses.
My sister was terrified.
She sat in the stands, clutching Jake's arm, watching men fly through the air and land in the dirt. Wondering what kind of strange planet she had landed on, she asked Jake, "Why are these men doing this? Are they being punished?" Jake laughed so hard, he nearly fell off his seat. And in that moment, my sister realized that she had not just been learning vocabulary. She had been learning an entirely new world. Every word she learned was a window into a culture she had never known existed. Every phrase she mastered opened a door to understanding people, but the learning process was not always smooth. There were plenty of moments when her limited English led to completely unintended consequences. One time, she wanted to compliment Jake on his cooking. She meant to say, "This steak is delicious." But instead, she accidentally said, "This steak is dangerous." Jake looked at her with a puzzled expression and asked, "Dangerous? Did you find a bone?" She tried to explain, her face turning bright red, but the more she tried, the worse it got. She ended up saying something like, "The cow is very strong, and I am scared." Jake just smiled, gave her a hug, and said, "You're doing great, honey. Just keep trying." And that was what she loved most about him. He never made her feel stupid. He never laughed at her mistakes in a mean way. He never corrected her in a way that made her feel small. He simply encouraged her, supported her, and celebrated every tiny improvement. This is actually backed by neuroscience. When you are in a supportive environment where you feel safe and accepted, your brain releases oxytocin and dopamine, neurotransmitters that enhance learning and memory. Your brain is actually more capable of acquiring new language skills when you are in a positive emotional state. Stress, on the other hand, releases cortisol, which impairs cognitive function and makes learning much more difficult. So the more love and support you have, the faster you learn. The more fear and pressure you feel, the slower you progress. This is why my sister's English improved so dramatically in such a short period of time.
She was not just studying.
She was living. She was loving. She was laughing. And all of those positive emotions were literally rewiring her brain to become more receptive to the new language. Another hilarious example happened when my sister first met Jake's friends. They were all cowboys, big guys with deep voices and strong accents. She wanted to make a good impression, so she practiced a simple greeting in English. Nice to meet you.
How are you?
She had rehearsed it dozens of times in her head, but when she actually said it, what came out was, nice to eat you.
How are you?
Her face turned crimson. Jake's friends looked at each other, trying not to laugh. And then one of them said, well, I hope you do not actually want to eat me. I am a bit tough and stringy. Everyone burst out laughing, including my sister. And that was the moment she realized something important. Mistakes are not failures. Mistakes are opportunities. They are opportunities to connect through humor. Opportunities to learn from experience. Opportunities to break down barriers and create genuine human connection. Because when you make a mistake, people see your vulnerability. And vulnerability is what makes us human. It is what makes people want to help you, support you, and root for you. It is what transforms a learning experience from a stressful obligation into a joyful journey. My sister started keeping a notebook of all her funny mistakes. She would write down what she said, what she meant to say, and what everyone's reaction was. And then she would practice the correct version until it became natural. This notebook became her most valuable learning tool. Not a textbook. Not a grammar guide. Not a vocabulary app. Just a simple notebook filled with real-life mistakes and corrections. Because real-life mistakes are the best teachers. They are memorable. They are personal. They are connected to genuine emotions and experiences. And when you learn something through a real emotional experience, you never forget it. That is the power of story-based learning. That is why this video is so effective. You're not just memorizing abstract words and grammar rules. You are living a story. You are experiencing emotions. You are connecting with characters. You are learning in the most natural, powerful way possible. Another thing my sister did to improve her English was to watch Western movies with Jake. They would sit on the couch together, watching John Wayne and Clint Eastwood. And Jake would pause the movie to explain words and phrases she did not understand. He would tell her stories about his childhood, about growing up on a ranch, about the traditions and values that shaped him. And through these conversations, she did not just learn English. She learned what it meant to be American. She learned the history, the culture, the way of life. She learned about independence and self-reliance, about hard work and determination, about being direct and honest, about standing up for what you believe in. All of this was invaluable. But the most important thing she learned was patience. Patience with herself. Patience with the process. Patience with the inevitable setbacks and frustrations that come with learning any new skill. She learned to celebrate small victories. She learned to be kind to herself when she made mistakes. She learned to trust that progress was happening even when it did not feel like it. And you need to learn these same lessons. You need to be patient with yourself. You need to celebrate every tiny improvement. You need to trust that you are making progress even when it does not feel like it. Because you are. Every time you listen to a story like this, your brain is strengthening new neural pathways. Every time you read along with the subtitles, your brain is building new connections between sounds and symbols. Every time you repeat a phrase out loud, your brain is practicing the motor skills needed to produce those sounds. It is happening. Even when you do not notice it. Even when you feel like you are not improving. It is happening. You are getting better. You are growing. You are transforming. And one day, sooner than you expect, you will have a moment of clarity. A moment when you realize that you understood something without translating. A moment when words come out of your mouth effortlessly. A moment when you feel truly fluent, truly connected, truly alive in a new language. That moment is coming. I promise you.
So keep going.
Keep listening. Keep reading.
Keep speaking.
Keep making mistakes. Keep laughing at yourself. Keep embracing the beautiful, messy, wonderful journey of learning. My sister made it. She went from barely understanding basic greetings to becoming a confident English speaker who could navigate a completely different culture with grace and humor. And you can do it too. So, what happened next? How did my sister's relationship with Jake deepen as her English improved? How did they navigate the challenges of building a life together across two completely different worlds? And what role did his family play in welcoming her into their lives? Those are the questions we'll explore in Section 6.
Stay tuned.
The best is yet to come. The Cowboy's world. Rodeos, ranches, and real talk. Picture yourself standing in the middle of a world that feels like it belongs to another century. A world where men rise before the sun, where the smell of hay and leather fills the air, where the rhythm of life is dictated not by clocks and calendars, but by the needs of animals and the cycles of nature. This was the world my sister had entered, and it was as foreign to her as Mars would be to someone who had never left Earth. But she was determined to understand it, to embrace it, and eventually, to call it home. Jake's world was built on traditions that had been passed down through generations. His family had owned the ranch for over 100 years. His great-grandfather had settled on this land, had built the first barn with his own hands, had raised cattle and horses and children under the vast Texas sky. And Jake, like his father and his grandfather before him, had grown up learning the ways of the cowboy. He could ride a horse before he could ride a bicycle. He could rope a calf before he learned to tie his shoes. He knew the land so intimately that he could tell you where every fence post was, where every water source was, where every cow liked to hide when the weather turned bad. For my sister, this was completely overwhelming at first. She had grown up in a city where everything was concrete and steel, where nature was something you visited on the weekends, not something you lived in every single day. She had never milked a cow. She had never mended a fence. She had never even seen a horse up close before coming to Texas. But Jake was incredibly patient. He understood that she came from a different world, and he never expected her to become a cowgirl overnight. He would wake up at 4 a.m. to do his chores, and he would always leave a cup of coffee and a note for her, written in simple English, telling her what he was doing and when he would be back. He would take her on slow walks around the property, pointing out different plants and animals, explaining what everything was called in English, helping her build her vocabulary in the most natural way possible. He showed her how to feed the horses, how to brush their coats, how to approach them so they would not be frightened. He taught her about the different breeds of cattle, about the seasons of the ranch, about the weather patterns that determined everything from planting to harvesting. And through all of this, my sister was not just learning English. She was learning an entire way of life. One of the most memorable experiences for her was attending her first real cattle drive. Jake had to move a group of cows from one pasture to another, and he asked if she wanted to come along. She was terrified. She had only ridden a horse a few times, and she was not confident at all. But she wanted to be part of his world, so she said yes. The day started before dawn. The air was crisp and cold, and the stars were still visible in the sky. Jake saddled up Dusty for her and Storm for himself, and they rode out into the vast expanse of the ranch. My sister told me later that it was one of the most beautiful experiences of her entire life. The sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The cows moved slowly, steadily, almost like a river of brown and white flowing across the green grass. And Jake rode beside her, pointing out landmarks, telling her stories about the land, making her feel like she was part of something ancient and sacred. She did not understand all of his words, but she understood the feeling. She understood that she was witnessing something that had been happening on this land for over a century. She understood that she was becoming part of a story that had started long before she was born and would continue long after she was gone. And she understood that this was what it meant to be truly connected to a place, to a person, to a way of life. The rodeo, which had initially terrified her so much, eventually became one of her favorite things. She learned to appreciate the skill and courage of the cowboys, the beauty of the horses, the joy of the crowd. She even started cheering along with everyone else, shouting encouragement to the riders, laughing at the clowns, eating the barbecue and corn dogs that were sold from food trucks. She learned that the rodeo was not just a spectacle.
It was a community.
It was where people gathered to celebrate their shared culture, to honor their traditions, to support each other, and have fun together. And she was welcomed into that community with open arms. Jake's friends, who had initially intimidated her with their loud voices and strong accents, became her friends too. They taught her how to two-step, how to line dance, how to enjoy a cold beer on a hot afternoon. They told her stories about their lives, their families, their dreams. And she told them stories about Vietnam, about her family, about the things she missed, and the things she loved. These conversations were not always easy. There were still misunderstandings. There were still moments of confusion. There were still times when she had to ask people to repeat themselves 3 or 4 times. But she did not let that stop her. She kept talking. She kept listening. She kept connecting. And that is the most important lesson of all. You do not need perfect English to connect with people. You need courage. You need curiosity. You need willingness to be vulnerable. You need to care more about understanding than about being perfect. There is a fascinating scientific concept called the threshold of fluency, which suggests that once you reach a certain level of language proficiency, the rest of your learning happens through social interaction. You do not need to master every grammar rule or memorize every vocabulary word. You just need to reach a point where you can engage in meaningful conversations, and then the language will continue to develop naturally as you interact with others. My sister reached that threshold faster than she ever expected. Not because she was a genius, not because she studied for hours every day, but because she was immersed in a supportive community where she was constantly using English for real, meaningful purposes. She was not learning English in a vacuum. She was learning English by living her life, by falling in love, by building a home, by becoming part of a family. And that is the most effective way to learn any language. The deep conversations that happened late at night on the porch were particularly powerful. Jake would tell her about his fears and hopes, about his childhood, about the things that had shaped him into the man he was. And she would tell him about her own struggles, her own dreams, her own journey. They talked about their cultures, the differences and the similarities. They talked about their families, the people they loved, and the people they had lost. They talked about their future, the life they wanted to build together, the challenges they would face, and the joys they would share. And through all of these conversations, my sister's English became more fluid, more natural, more expressive. She learned to articulate complex emotions. She learned to express nuanced ideas. She learned to tell stories that made people laugh and cry and think. The cowboy world, which had seemed so alien to her at first, gradually became her own world. She learned the rhythm of ranch life. She learned to appreciate the simplicity and beauty of the wide-open spaces. She learned to find peace in the silence and joy in the small moments. She learned that home is not a place. Home is a feeling. Home is the sense of belonging that comes from being truly seen and accepted by the people you love. Jake's family was incredibly welcoming. His mother, Martha, taught my sister how to bake the family's famous apple pie. His father, Robert, taught her how to drive a tractor. His sister, Sarah, taught her how to ride a horse with more confidence. And they all taught her that family is not just about blood. Family is about who shows up for you, who loves you, who supports you. And they showed up for her in every way possible. They learned to make Vietnamese food. They learned to pronounce her name correctly. They learned to appreciate the beauty of her culture. They made her feel like she had always been part of their family, like she had always belonged. That is the magic of cross-cultural love. It does not just bring two people together. It brings two worlds together. It creates something new, something beautiful, something that did not exist before. And that something is more powerful, more meaningful, more enduring than either world could have been alone. So as my sister's English improved and her connection to the cowboy world deepened, she began to realize something profound. She was not just learning English. She was learning herself. She was discovering parts of her identity that she had never known existed. She was becoming a version of herself that was richer, more complex, more beautiful than she had ever imagined possible. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that this was exactly where she was meant to be. But there were still challenges ahead. The biggest challenge of all was yet to come. How would two families from opposite sides of the world come together? How would they celebrate traditions that were so different from each other? How would they find common ground when everything from the food to the music to the language seemed designed to divide them? Those are the questions we will explore in Section 7. The wedding was coming, and it was going to be a celebration like no one had ever seen before. When two cultures collide in the kitchen. Let me tell you about the battlefield where some of the most intense cultural clashes happened. It was not in the living room. It was not at family gatherings. It was not even during deep conversations about values and traditions. It was in the kitchen. The kitchen, that sacred space where families gather, where recipes are passed down through generations, where love is expressed through food and shared meals. And for my sister, the kitchen became the ultimate testing ground for her relationship with Jake and his family. You see, in Vietnamese culture, food is everything. It is how we show love. It is how we celebrate. It is how we mourn. It is how we connect with our ancestors and with each other. Every family has their own secret recipes, their own special techniques, their own traditions that have been passed down from grandmother to mother to daughter. My sister grew up in a household where her mother spent hours in the kitchen, preparing elaborate meals with multiple dishes, each one carefully crafted with love and attention to detail. She learned to cook by watching her mother, by smelling the aromas, by tasting and adjusting and perfecting.
It was not just about feeding people.
It was about nourishing their souls. So when my sister moved to Texas and started cooking for Jake, she naturally wanted to share her culture through food. She wanted to introduce him to the flavors of Vietnam. She wanted to show him the dishes that had shaped her childhood, that brought back memories of her family, that connected her to her homeland. She wanted to make pho, the iconic Vietnamese noodle soup that is so much more than just a dish. Pho is comfort. Pho is home. Pho is the taste of Vietnam in a bowl. She spent hours preparing the broth, simmering bones and spices, carefully skimming the fat, adding fish sauce and sugar and salt until it was perfectly balanced. She prepared the rice noodles, the thinly sliced beef, the fresh herbs and bean sprouts. She set the table with bowls, chopsticks, spoons, and all the condiments that make pho an interactive experience. She was so proud, so excited. She could not wait to see Jake's face when he tasted this piece of her homeland. And then she served it. Jake looked at the bowl in front of him with a mixture of confusion and uncertainty. The broth was clear and fragrant. The noodles were soft and white. The beef was pink and tender. But there was something about it that seemed so foreign to him. He picked up his chopsticks awkwardly, trying to figure out how to use them. He tried to eat the noodles, but they slipped back into the bowl. He tried to sip the broth, but he burned his tongue. He looked at my sister with a helpless expression and said, "This is very interesting." It was not the enthusiastic reaction she had hoped for. She felt deflated. She felt like she had failed. She felt like her culture had been rejected. But then something amazing happened. Jake saw the disappointment in her eyes, and he immediately realized that this was not just about food. This was about her. This was about her identity. This was about her wanting to share a piece of herself with him. He put down his chopsticks, reached across the table, and took her hand. He said, "Teach me how to eat this. I want to learn. I want to understand." And so she did. She showed him how to hold the chopsticks. She showed him how to pick up the noodles. She showed him how to dip the meat in the sauce. She showed him how to add herbs and chili and lime to customize the flavor. And slowly, awkwardly, hilariously, he learned. He made a mess. He splashed broth everywhere. He dropped noodles on his shirt. But he kept trying. Because he loved her. And love means showing up for the people you care about, even when it is hard. Even when you feel like you have no idea what you are doing. Even when you would rather eat a cheeseburger than a bowl of unfamiliar soup. The next day, Jake decided to return the favor. He was going to cook for her. He was going to make her a classic American meal, steak, mashed potatoes, and green beans. He was confident. He had been grilling since he was a teenager. He knew how to cook a perfect steak. This was going to be easy. And it was. He cooked the steak to perfection, seared on the outside, pink and juicy on the inside. He made the mashed potatoes creamy and buttery. He steamed the green beans until they were bright green and tender. It was a beautiful meal. But when he served it to my sister, she had a completely different reaction. She looked at the giant steak on her plate and felt overwhelmed. In Vietnam, meat is usually cut into small pieces and shared. A giant piece of meat on your own plate felt excessive, almost wasteful. She had to ask for a knife, and even then, she struggled to cut it. She had to eat the potatoes with a fork, but she kept thinking about how much she missed rice. She felt like she was betraying her culture just by eating this meal. But she did not say anything, because she loved Jake. And love means appreciating the effort people make, even when it is not exactly what you are used to. She smiled and said, "This is delicious." And in a way, it was not because of the food itself, but because of the love behind it. This was the beginning of their culinary journey together. They started experimenting. They started combining their cultures in the kitchen. They made pho with a Texas twist, adding brisket instead of beef. They made steak with a Vietnamese marinade, adding fish sauce and lemongrass. They made mashed potatoes with a hint of ginger and garlic. They made spring rolls with barbecue sauce instead of peanut sauce. It was a beautiful, chaotic, delicious fusion of two worlds. The kitchen became a place of learning and discovery, a place where they could be vulnerable and honest, a place where they could laugh at their mistakes and celebrate their successes, a place where they could bridge the gap between their cultures and create something new. And this is exactly what happens when you learn a language. You do not just learn words. You learn a culture. You learn a way of thinking. You learn a way of being. You learn to see the world through someone else's eyes. And in the process, you become more than you were before. You become a bridge between worlds. You become a translator not just of words, but of experiences, emotions, and dreams. My sister's mother-in-law, Martha, was also incredibly supportive. She had never cooked Vietnamese food before, but she was eager to learn. She would stand in the kitchen with my sister, watching her every move, asking questions, taking notes. She learned to make spring rolls.
She learned to make banh mi.
She learned to make a proper bowl of pho. And my sister taught her with patience and love, just as Jake had taught her to eat steak and mashed potatoes. These kitchen sessions became more than just cooking lessons. They became bonding experiences. They became opportunities for Martha to learn about my sister's culture and for my sister to feel like she was truly part of the family. Martha would tell stories about her own childhood, about growing up on the ranch, about the recipes that had been passed down through her family. And my sister would share stories about Vietnam, about her parents, about the food that had shaped her childhood. They were two women from completely different worlds, standing side by side in the kitchen, creating something beautiful together. That is the power of food. It transcends language. It transcends culture. It transcends everything that divides us. Because at the end of the day, everyone understands what it means to be hungry. Everyone understands what it means to be fed. Everyone understands what it means to be loved through a warm meal. My sister realized that the kitchen was not a battlefield.
It was a meeting place.
It was where two worlds could collide and create something new. It was where she could hold on to her identity while also embracing her new life. It was where she could be both Vietnamese and Texan, both traditional and modern, both her mother's daughter and her husband's wife. And that, my friend, is the secret to true cultural integration. It is not about choosing one culture over the other. It is about creating a new culture that contains elements of both. It is about building a bridge, not a wall. It is about finding the common ground where everyone can stand together and feel at home. So the kitchen became my sister's sanctuary, her safe space, her place of power. She was no longer just a visitor in this foreign land. She was a creator, a fusion artist, a bridge builder. And every meal she prepared was a testament to the beautiful, messy, delicious journey of two cultures learning to love each other. But there was still one big challenge ahead. One event that would require all the creativity, patience, and love they had cultivated. The wedding. How would they blend two completely different traditions into a celebration that honored both families? How would they navigate the expectations of a Vietnamese mother and a Texan mother-in-law? How would they create a ceremony that felt meaningful to everyone involved? That is the story we will explore in Section 8. The wedding was going to be an unforgettable event. The wedding that united two worlds. Imagine planning a wedding that must satisfy the expectations of two completely different cultures, two families with entirely different traditions, two sets of guests who speak different languages and have different ideas about what a wedding should look like. Now imagine that you are the bride and you are caught in the middle of all these competing expectations, trying to make everyone happy while also staying true to yourself and your love. That was my sister's reality as she and Jake prepared for their wedding. And let me tell you, the journey to that altar was just as eventful as the relationship that led them there. My sister's mother, who had finally accepted that her daughter was marrying an American cowboy, had very specific ideas about what the wedding should look like. She wanted a traditional Vietnamese ceremony with all the rituals and symbolism that had been part of her family for generations. She wanted the tea ceremony, where the bride and groom served tea to their parents as a sign of respect and gratitude. She wanted the traditional ao dai, the beautiful silk tunic and pants that Vietnamese brides wear on their wedding day. She wanted the elaborate reception with multiple courses of food, the speeches, the singing, the dancing, the whole 9 yards. She wanted to invite all the relatives, all the friends, all the neighbors, everyone who had ever known the family. She wanted the wedding to be a grand celebration that honored their heritage and showed the world that their daughter was marrying into a good family, even if that family happened to be American. Jake's mother, Martha, had equally strong opinions. She wanted a traditional Texas wedding with all the cowboy flair. She wanted Jake to wear his best Stetson hat and his finest boots. She wanted the ceremony to be held outdoors, under the vast Texas sky, with the horses and cattle as witnesses. She wanted a barbecue reception with brisket and ribs and all the fixings. She wanted country music and line dancing, and a good old-fashioned hoedown. She wanted all her friends and neighbors to come and celebrate, to show their support for the couple and to welcome my sister into the community. She wanted the wedding to be a reflection of who they were, a celebration of their life and their values and their land. And my sister and Jake were caught in the middle, trying to honor both families, trying to create a wedding that was meaningful to everyone, trying to find a way to blend two completely different traditions into one beautiful celebration. It was not easy. There were arguments. There were tears. There were moments when my sister wanted to just elope and forget the whole thing. But she kept going, because she knew that this wedding was not just about her and Jake. It was about bringing two families together. It was about building bridges. It was about showing everyone that love can overcome any difference. The first major compromise was the venue. They decided to hold the ceremony on the ranch. This made Martha happy because it was their home. It made my mother happy because she could see the beauty of the land where her daughter would be living. And it made my sister happy because it was a place that held so much meaning for her and Jake. The next compromise was the attire. My sister would wear a traditional ao dai for the tea ceremony and the formal photos, and then change into a beautiful white wedding dress for the main ceremony. Jake would wear his cowboy hat and boots, but he would also wear a traditional Vietnamese silk shirt for the tea ceremony. This way, both cultures were represented. Both families felt honored. Both traditions were respected. The tea ceremony was held in the morning, with both families gathered in the living room of the ranch house. My mother had flown in from Vietnam with a suitcase full of ceremonial items, the tea set, the red envelopes, the traditional decorations. She was nervous, but she was also proud. She was performing the ritual that her mother had performed for her, that her grandmother had performed for her mother. It was a connection to the past, a link to her ancestors, a way of passing on traditions to the next generation. Jake was nervous too. He had practiced the ritual with my sister, but he was still worried about making mistakes. He did not want to offend anyone. He did not want to show disrespect. He wanted to honor my sister's culture in the same way that she had honored his. When he served the tea to my parents, his hands were shaking, but he did it perfectly. He bowed his head. He said the right words. He showed the respect that was expected of him. And my mother, who had been so worried about this day, who had been so uncertain about her daughter marrying an American, started to cry, because she saw the love in his eyes. She saw the effort he had made. She saw that he was not just marrying her daughter. He was embracing her culture, her family, her heritage. And that meant more to her than any traditional ceremony ever could. The main ceremony was held in the afternoon, under a beautiful wooden arbor that Jake had built with his own hands. The guests were a mix of cowboys in their best hats and Vietnamese relatives in their finest clothes. It was a sight to behold. The diversity, the color,
The joy.
My sister walked down the aisle to a song that was a fusion of Vietnamese and American music. It was a beautiful, emotional moment that brought tears to everyone's eyes. When she reached the altar, Jake took her hand, looked into her eyes, and whispered, "You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen." And she whispered back, "And you are the most wonderful man I have ever known." They exchanged vows that they had written themselves, promises that reflected their unique journey and their love for each other. They promised to honor each other's cultures. They promised to be patient and kind. They promised to build a life together that was stronger than any difference, more beautiful than any challenge. The reception was a wild, wonderful fusion of two worlds. There was Vietnamese food and Texas barbecue. There was country music and Vietnamese pop. There was line dancing and traditional Vietnamese dances. There was a photo booth with cowboy hats and AO dye props. There was laughter and tears and joy and love. It was everything my sister had ever dreamed of. But the most beautiful moment came at the end of the night. My mother, who had been so resistant to this marriage, who had spent so many sleepless nights worrying about her daughter, walked up to Jake and took his hands. She looked him in the eye and said in her broken English, "You take care of my daughter. You love her. You protect her. She is my heart." And Jake, who had tears streaming down his face, said, "I promise, Mama. I will take care of her for the rest of my life." And then they hugged. Two people from completely different worlds, united by their love for the same woman, embracing each other like family. It was a moment of pure, beautiful connection that transcended all boundaries. That is the power of love. It breaks down walls. It builds bridges. It creates family where there was none. My sister's wedding was not just a celebration of her marriage to Jake. It was a celebration of the merging of two worlds. It was a testament to the power of love to overcome cultural differences. It was a reminder that at the end of the day, we are all human. We all want the same things. And we can all find common ground if we are willing to try. As the night ended and the stars came out over the Texas sky, my sister and Jake stood together, looking at their families and friends dancing and laughing and celebrating. And my sister felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She had found her home. She had found her family. She had found her love. And she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. But the journey was not over. There were still challenges ahead. Building a life together, navigating the differences, starting a family of their own. How would they manage the complexities of raising children between two cultures? How would they pass on the traditions of both their families to the next generation? How would they ensure that their children would be proud of their heritage, both Vietnamese and American? Those are the questions we will explore in Section 9, the next chapter of their beautiful story. Building a family between two continents. Now we enter the most beautiful and complex chapter of my sister's journey. The wedding was over, the celebrations had faded, and the real work of building a life together had begun. But this was not just about two people learning to live together. This was about two cultures learning to coexist under one roof, about two families learning to become one, and about two people who were about to become parents and had absolutely no idea how to navigate the beautiful chaos that was coming. My sister and Jake had talked about having children before they got married. They both wanted a family. They both wanted to create something beautiful together. But they had not fully discussed what it would mean to raise children between two cultures, two languages, two completely different ways of seeing the world. And when my sister found out she was pregnant, all of those unspoken questions suddenly became urgent and real. What language would they speak to their children? Would they teach them Vietnamese? Would they teach them English? Would they try to teach both? How would they explain their different traditions to a child who was growing up in America but had Vietnamese blood running through their veins? How would they ensure that their children were proud of their heritage, both the Cowboy heritage and the Vietnamese heritage? How would they navigate the inevitable questions about identity that their children would face? These were not easy questions. There were no simple answers. And my sister and Jake had to figure it out together, one conversation at a time, one day at a time, one challenge at a time. The first decision they made was about language. They decided that my sister would speak Vietnamese to their children, and Jake would speak English to them. This is a common approach in bilingual families, and it is backed by extensive research. Children are remarkably adept at learning multiple languages simultaneously, especially in the first few years of life. Their brains are like sponges, absorbing sounds, patterns, and meanings with an ease that adults can only dream of. The key is consistency. Each parent needs to speak their language consistently, so the child learns to associate each language with a specific person. My sister was nervous at first. She worried that her children would be confused. She worried that they would not learn English well enough. She worried that they would be caught between two worlds and not feel like they belonged anywhere. But Jake reassured her. He told her that their children were lucky. They were lucky to have access to two cultures, two languages, two ways of understanding the world. They would grow up with a richness that most children never experience. And he was right. When their first child, a beautiful baby girl named Lily, was born, my sister held her in her arms and spoke to her in Vietnamese. She sang Vietnamese lullabies. She told Vietnamese stories. She whispered Vietnamese words of love. And Lily responded. She smiled. She cooed. She made the sounds of both languages with equal ease. As Lily grew older, she became a natural translator between her parents. She would hear something in Vietnamese from her mother and repeat it in English to her father. She would hear something in English from her father and repeat it in Vietnamese to her mother. She was a bridge between two worlds, and she did it effortlessly. My sister and Jake also had to navigate the cultural differences in parenting. In Vietnamese culture, parenting is often more collective. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins all play a role in raising a child. There is a saying in Vietnamese that it takes a village to raise a child, and that is taken very seriously. In American culture, especially in the rural Texas community where they lived, parenting is often more individualistic. Parents are expected to be the primary caregivers, and extended family members play a smaller role. My sister and Jake had to find a middle ground. They decided that they would raise their children with the help of both families. My mother would visit from Vietnam regularly, spending months at a time helping with childcare and sharing Vietnamese traditions with her grandchildren. Jake's mother, Martha, would also be deeply involved, taking the children on walks around the ranch, teaching them about animals and nature, sharing American traditions. The children would grow up surrounded by love from both sides of the family. They would learn to appreciate both cultures. They would feel connected to both worlds. Another challenge was food. My sister was determined that her children would eat Vietnamese food. She wanted them to appreciate the flavors of her childhood, to understand the comfort of a warm bowl of pho on a cold day, to feel the joy of sharing a meal with family. But Jake also wanted his children to appreciate American food. He wanted them to love barbecue and burgers and all the classic dishes of Texas. So they compromised. They cooked both cuisines at home. They exposed their children to the full range of flavors, from the fragrant herbs of Vietnam to the smoky richness of Texas barbecue. And the children loved it all. They would eat pho with chopsticks one night, and ribs with their hands the next. They would speak Vietnamese with their mother and English with their father. They would celebrate Tet, the Vietnamese New Year, and they would celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas. They would learn to ride horses and to respect their ancestors. They would be both Vietnamese and American, a beautiful fusion of two worlds. As the children grew, my sister also had to navigate the challenges of helping them understand their identity. Lily, in particular, had questions. She would ask my sister, "Why do we speak Vietnamese at home when everyone else speaks English?" And my sister would explain that Vietnamese was the language of her heart, the language of her ancestors, the language that connected her to her family and her history. She would tell Lily stories about Vietnam, about her childhood, about the beauty and the struggle and the resilience of her people. She would teach Lily to be proud of her heritage, to embrace both parts of her identity, to understand that being mixed was not a weakness but a strength. There is a powerful concept in psychology called bicultural identity integration. It describes the ability to see one's two cultures as compatible rather than conflicting. People who achieve bicultural identity integration are more confident, more resilient, and more successful than those who feel torn between their cultures. And my sister wanted her children to achieve that integration. She wanted them to feel comfortable in both worlds, to be able to navigate both cultures with ease, to feel like they belonged everywhere and nowhere. Jake was incredibly supportive in this journey. He learned Vietnamese, so he could communicate with his wife's family. He learned to cook Vietnamese food so he could share meals with his children and teach them about their heritage. He took the family to Vietnam for visits so the children could see where their mother grew up, meet their extended family, and experience the beauty of the country firsthand. He was not just a passive participant in their bicultural journey. He was an active partner. He was a bridge builder. He was a champion of cultural integration. And my sister loved him all the more for it. But it was not always easy. There were moments of tension, moments of misunderstanding, moments when my sister felt like she was losing her identity, or when Jake felt like he was being pushed aside. There were moments when the children struggled with their identity, when they felt torn between two worlds and did not know where they belonged. There were moments when my sister missed Vietnam so much she could barely breathe. But they got through it all. They got through it because they had love. They got through it because they had commitment. They got through it because they understood that building a family between two continents was not about choosing one culture over the other. It was about creating something new, something beautiful, something that had never existed before. The children grew up to be remarkable young people. They were confident, curious, and compassionate. They spoke two languages fluently. They understood two cultures deeply. They could ride horses and cook pho. They could celebrate Tet and Thanksgiving. They were a testament to the power of love to overcome any obstacle. My sister often says that her children are her greatest achievement. Not because they are perfect, but because they are proof that love can bridge any divide. They are proof that two worlds can come together and create something beautiful. They are proof that family is not about blood or birthplace. It is about connection, commitment, and love. So, as my sister watched her children grow, she felt a sense of gratitude that she could never fully express. She was grateful for the courage that had brought her to Texas. She was grateful for the love that had sustained her through the hard times. She was grateful for the family she had built, a family that was stronger and more beautiful than anything she could have ever imagined. But there were still lessons to be learned. There were still challenges to face. There was still the ongoing work of understanding, accepting, and integrating two cultures into one life. That is the journey we will continue in Section 10. The moment when everything finally clicked. The moment I understood her choice. You know those moments in life when everything suddenly makes sense? When all the pieces of a puzzle you have been staring at for years suddenly click into place, and you see the whole picture for the first time. That happened to me during my first visit to the ranch, about a year after my sister's wedding. I had always supported her decision, of course. I had been there at the airport when she left, had talked to her on the phone every week, had listened to her stories about Jake and the ranch and her new life. But part of me had always wondered if she had made the right choice. Part of me had always questioned whether she had given up too much for a love that seemed so improbable. Part of me had always worried that she might wake up one day and regret everything. But when I stepped off the plane in Texas and saw her standing there, waiting for me with a huge smile on her face, all of my doubts evaporated. She looked different. She looked happier than I had ever seen her. There was a glow about her, a lightness in her step, a sparkle in her eyes that I had never noticed before. She was wearing jeans and boots and a cowboy hat, and she looked like she had been born in them. She was completely at home in this world that had once been so foreign to her. The drive to the ranch was different from what I had expected. I had imagined long stretches of emptiness, of nothingness, of loneliness. But what I saw was beauty. The wide open spaces were not empty. They were full of life. They were full of possibility. They were full of the kind of freedom that you can only find when there is nothing blocking your view of the horizon. My sister pointed out landmarks as we drove. She told me about the first time she had seen a cow up close, the first time she had ridden a horse, the first time she had tried to bake a pie and burned it to a crisp. She laughed at her own stories, and her laughter was so genuine, so free, so full of joy that I could not help but laugh along with her. When we arrived at the ranch, Jake was waiting for us on the porch. He was wearing his hat and boots, just as I had imagined, and he was holding a cup of coffee in one hand and a sleeping baby in the other. That was Lily, my beautiful niece, who had been born 6 months before. She was the most beautiful baby I had ever seen, with her mother's almond eyes and her father's warm smile. Jake handed me the baby and said, "Welcome to our home. We are so glad you are here." And in that moment I understood. I understood why my sister had left everything behind. I understood why she had taken such a huge risk. I understood why she had chosen this life. It was not just about Jake. It was not just about love. It was about finding a place where she could be her truest self. It was about building a life that felt authentic and meaningful. It was about creating a family that was filled with love and laughter and joy. The next few days were a revelation for me. I watched my sister in her new element, and I saw a woman I had never truly known before. She was confident. She was capable. She was strong. She was not the shy, reserved girl who had left Vietnam 2 years before. She was a woman who knew who she was and what she wanted. She was a woman who had found her purpose. She woke up early every morning to help Jake with the chores. She fed the horses, collected the eggs, mended the fences. She cooked elaborate meals that blended Vietnamese and American flavors. She played with Lily and sang to her in Vietnamese and English. She was doing everything that had once seemed impossible to her, and she was doing it with grace and joy. One evening, we sat on the porch together, watching the sun set over the fields. The sky was a masterpiece of orange and pink and purple, and the air was filled with the sounds of crickets and the distant lowing of cows. I asked her the question I had been wanting to ask for so long. "Do you ever regret it?" She was silent for a moment, and then she smiled. "Not for a single second," she said. "I miss Vietnam sometimes. I miss our parents and our grandmother and our home. But this is my home now. This is where I belong. I have everything I ever wanted. A loving husband, a beautiful child, a life that I built with my own hands." She looked out at the fields, and her eyes were filled with a deep, profound peace. You know, I used to think that happiness was something you found, but now I know that happiness is something you create. It is not about being in the right place or having the right things. It is about being with the right people and making the most of what you have. I looked at her and saw a woman who had faced her fears, embraced her challenges, and emerged stronger than ever. I saw a woman who had taken the biggest risk of her life and had been rewarded with the greatest reward possible. I saw a woman who had found true love and had built a beautiful life around it. And I realized that she had not given up anything. She had gained everything. She had not lost her identity. She had discovered it. She had not abandoned her culture. She had expanded it. She had not compromised her values. She had deepened them. The next day, Jake took me on a tour of the ranch. He showed me the horses, the cattle, the barns, the equipment. He told me stories about his childhood, about his father and grandfather, about the generations of cowboys who had worked this land before him. He talked about my sister with such love and admiration that it brought tears to my eyes. He said, "Your sister is the strongest person I have ever met. She came here with nothing but courage and hope. She learned a new language. She adapted to a new culture. She built a life from scratch. She is my hero." And in that moment, I understood why my sister had fallen in love with him. It was not just his smile or his kindness or his patience. It was the way he saw her. He saw her for who she truly was, and he loved her completely. There is a beautiful quote from the writer Maya Angelou that says, "Love recognizes no barriers. It jumps hurdles, leaps fences, penetrates walls to arrive at its destination full of hope." That is exactly what my sister and Jake had done. They had jumped hurdles and leaped fences and penetrated walls. They had overcome every obstacle that stood in their way. And they had arrived at their destination full of hope. I also got to spend time with Martha, Jake's mother, who had become like a second mother to my sister. She showed me her garden, her kitchen, her collection of family recipes. She told me stories about Jake as a little boy, about the mischief he had gotten into, about the man he had become. She said, "I was worried when Jake told me he was marrying a woman from Vietnam. I did not know anything about her culture or her language. But then I met your sister, and I realized that love is universal. It does not matter where you come from. It matters who you are." And she was right. My sister had won over everyone she met with her warmth, her kindness, her determination. She had not just married Jake. She had married his entire family. She had become a beloved daughter, sister, and friend. As my visit came to an end, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. I was grateful for my sister's courage. I was grateful for Jake's love. I was grateful for their beautiful family. I was grateful for the lesson they had taught me about love and culture and identity. I realized that my sister had not just found love. She had found herself. And in doing so, she had shown me something that I had never fully understood before. She had shown me that the most beautiful love stories are not the ones that are easy. They are the ones that require courage. They are the ones that demand sacrifice. They are the ones that challenge you to grow, to change, to become someone you never thought you could be. As I boarded the plane back to Hanoi, I looked out the window at the vast Texas sky and thought about everything I had seen and learned. I thought about my sister and her cowboy. I thought about their journey and their love. I thought about my own journey with English and with life. And I made a promise to myself. I promised that I would stop being afraid. I promised that I would embrace challenges instead of avoiding them. I promised that I would take risks and pursue my dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. Because my sister had shown me that anything is possible when you have love and courage and hope. She had shown me that the greatest adventures in life are the ones that scare you the most. She had shown me that home is not a place. It is a feeling. It is the feeling of being with people who love you and accept you and see you for who you truly are. And she had shown me that love really does conquer all. It conquers distance. It conquers difference. It conquers fear. It conquers everything that stands in its way. So as I flew home, I carried with me a piece of Texas in my heart. I carried the memory of my sister's smile, Jake's kindness, Lily's laughter, and the vast, beautiful sky that had become their home. I carried the understanding that true love is not about finding someone who is perfect. It is about finding someone who makes you want to be better. And that is exactly what my sister had found. She had found a cowboy who made her want to be better. She had found a man who showed her that love has no boundaries. She had found a life that was richer and more beautiful than anything she could have ever imagined. And in the process, she had taught me the most important lesson of all. Love is not just about the heart. It is about the courage to follow it, no matter where it leads. So, what happened next? How did my sister's story continue? How did she navigate the ups and downs of marriage and motherhood and the ongoing challenge of bridging two cultures? And what final lessons did she learn that changed her forever? Those are the questions we will explore in section 11. The final chapter of her journey is almost here. Finding home in the most unlikely place. There is a moment in every great journey when the traveler stops looking for a destination and starts realizing they have already arrived. It is not a dramatic moment. There are no fireworks, no orchestral music, no grand declarations. It is a quiet moment, a subtle shift, a gentle realization that creeps up on you when you are not paying attention. For my sister, that moment came on a completely ordinary Tuesday afternoon, about 3 years after she had moved to Texas. She was standing in the kitchen, making lunch for Lily, who is now a cheerful 2-year-old who spoke a delightful mix of Vietnamese and English. Jake was out in the fields, checking on the cattle. The sun was shining through the window, casting warm golden light across the wooden floor. And my sister suddenly realized that she felt completely, utterly, peacefully at home. Not just comfortable, not just adjusted, not just surviving. Truly, deeply, profoundly at home. It was a feeling she had not expected. She had spent so many years missing Vietnam, longing for her family, dreaming of the streets and sounds and smells of her childhood. She had assumed that she would always feel like a visitor in this strange land, that she would always carry a piece of her heart back in Hanoi. But somewhere along the way, without her even noticing, Texas had become home. The dusty fields, the wide open sky, the sound of crickets at night, the smell of hay and horses, the warmth of Jake's smile, the laughter of her daughter, the kindness of her neighbors, the sense of community that had welcomed her with open arms. All of it had seeped into her soul. All of it had become part of who she was. She told me about this moment during one of our weekly video calls. I could see it in her eyes. That deep, peaceful contentment that only comes when you truly belong somewhere. She said, "I was making lunch, just a simple meal, and I looked out the window and saw Jake riding back on Storm, with Dusty following behind. And Lily was playing on the floor with her toys, and I thought, this is it. This is everything I ever wanted. This is my life. And I would not change a single thing about it." That moment was significant for another reason, too. It was the moment my sister stopped comparing her life to what it could have been. She stopped wondering what would have happened if she had stayed in Vietnam, if she had married someone from her own culture, if she had followed the path that everyone expected her to follow. She stopped mourning the life she might have had and started celebrating the life she had built. This is a powerful psychological shift. Psychologists call it cognitive closure, the ability to accept a decision and move forward without constant second-guessing. People who achieve cognitive closure are happier, more satisfied, and more resilient than those who remain stuck in a cycle of doubt and regret. My sister had achieved cognitive closure. She had accepted her choice. She had embraced her life. She had found peace. And that peace radiated from her in everything she did. She started taking on more responsibility in the community. She joined the local church, even though she had never been particularly religious. She made friends with the other ranch wives, women who had grown up in Texas and had never left. They taught her how to can vegetables, how to sew, how to make the perfect batch of chili. And she taught them how to make spring rolls, how to cook rice properly, how to use chopsticks with surprising skill. She became a bridge between her two worlds, sharing the best of both cultures with everyone she met. She started teaching Vietnamese to a few of the neighbor children, who were fascinated by the exotic sounds and symbols of her native language. She would sit with them on the porch, pointing to pictures and saying the words in Vietnamese, while the children would giggle and try to repeat the sounds. It was a small act of cultural exchange, but it meant so much to her. It meant that her heritage was not just something she held onto privately. It was something she could share, something she could pass on, something that would live on beyond her. Jake supported all of her efforts. He was proud of her for embracing the community, for finding her place, for becoming a beloved member of the ranch family. He would often say to her, "You are the best thing that ever happened to this place. You brought something new, something beautiful, something that we never knew we needed." And he was right. My sister had brought a piece of Vietnam to Texas, and in doing so, she had enriched everyone's lives. She had shown them that love and culture and language are not barriers. They are gifts. They are opportunities to learn and grow and connect. She had shown them that the world is bigger and more beautiful than they had ever imagined. As the years passed, my sister and Jake welcomed 2 more children into their family. A son named Thomas, who was born with his father's blue eyes and his mother's warm smile. And another daughter named Anna, who was the spitting image of my sister as a child. The house on the ranch became a bustling, joyful, chaotic place filled with the sounds of children laughing and playing, the smell of delicious food cooking in the kitchen, and the warmth of a family that was growing stronger every day. My sister often said that the house was too small for all of them, but she would not have it any other way. The children were all bilingual, speaking Vietnamese with their mother and English with their father, switching between the 2 languages with an ease that amazed everyone who heard them. They celebrated both Vietnamese and American holidays. They ate both Vietnamese and American food. They listened to both Vietnamese and American music. They were a walking, talking, living example of cultural integration. And my sister was incredibly proud of them. She would often say, "My children are not just Vietnamese or American. They are both. They are the best of both worlds." And that is a gift that I am so grateful to give them. But the most beautiful thing about my sister's journey was not just the success of her integration. It was the way she had learned to embrace her own identity in the process. She was no longer the insecure girl who had flown to Texas with nothing but hope and fear. She was a confident, capable, accomplished woman who knew exactly who she was and what she wanted. She had learned to love herself, not despite her differences, but because of them. She had learned that her culture was not a weakness to be hidden but a strength to be celebrated. She had learned that her accent was not a flaw but a reflection of her journey. She had learned that her story was not a story of loss but a story of gain. Of course, there were still challenges. There were still moments of loneliness. There were still times when she missed her family in Vietnam so much that she could barely breathe. There were still moments of cultural confusion, when she did not understand a joke or a reference, when she felt like an outsider looking in. But those moments no longer defined her. They were just moments, passing clouds in an otherwise clear sky. She had learned to ride the waves of emotion without being swept away by them. She had learned to find joy in the small things and strength in the hard times. She had learned that resilience is not about never falling. It is about getting back up every single time. And she had learned that home is not a place on a map. It is a feeling in your heart. It is the sense of belonging that comes from being truly loved and accepted for who you are. It is the warmth of a partner's embrace, the laughter of your children, the kindness of your community. It is the peace that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be. As my sister looked back on her journey, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything that had brought her here. The fear, the doubt, the struggle, the triumph. It had all been part of the path. It had all been part of the process. It had all been part of the beautiful, messy, wonderful adventure of building a life between two worlds. And she would not trade a single moment of it for anything, because every moment had shaped her into the woman she was today. Every challenge had made her stronger. Every joy had made her wiser. Every tear had made her more compassionate. Every laugh had made her more alive. And as she stood on the porch of her ranch house, looking out at the endless Texas sky, she felt a profound sense of peace. She had found her home. She had found her love. She had found herself. And that, my friend, is the most beautiful ending anyone could ever ask for. But there is still one more section left. One more chapter to close. One more lesson to learn. In section 12, we will bring everything together. We will reflect on the journey. We will celebrate the happy ending. And we will discover the final, most important lesson that my sister's story has to offer. Stay with me. The end is near, but it is going to be beautiful. Happy ending. Love doesn't need translation. And so we arrive at the final chapter of this beautiful journey. The end of the story, but not the end of the lessons, not the end of the love. And certainly not the end of the adventure that my sister and Jake have been living together for all these years. When I look back at everything that has happened since that phone call, since the moment my sister told me she was marrying a cowboy, I am still amazed by the sheer impossibility of it all. She was a girl from Hanoi, a city of 8 million people, a place of chaotic motorbikes and crowded streets and the constant hum of urban life. She was someone who had never even seen a horse up close, who had never stepped foot on a farm, who had never been anywhere without the comfort of her family and her culture and her language. And now she is a ranch wife, a mother of 3 beautiful bilingual children, a beloved member of a Texas community that has embraced her as one of their own. She has learned to ride horses and mend fences and cook brisket and speak English with a confidence that she never thought possible. She has built a life that is so different from everything she knew that it seems like the plot of a movie. But it is real. It is her life. And it is beautiful. The final lesson that my sister's story teaches us is this. Love does not need translation. It does not need perfect grammar or flawless pronunciation or a complete understanding of every single word. Love is a language of its own. It is the language of the heart. It is the language of smiles and tears and embraces and shared moments of joy and sorrow. It is the language of showing up for each other, of being patient and kind, of putting someone else's happiness before your own. My sister and Jake did not need a translator to fall in love. They did not need to speak the same language perfectly to understand each other deeply. They needed patience. They needed empathy. They needed the willingness to try, to make mistakes, to laugh at themselves, and to keep going even when things were hard. And they had all of that. They had love. And love was enough. This is not just a romantic notion.
It is backed by science.
Research has shown that emotional connection and shared experiences are far more important for relationship satisfaction than perfect communication. Couples who are willing to be vulnerable, to be patient, to be kind, tend to thrive regardless of their language skills. And couples who are rigid, impatient, and perfectionistic tend to struggle, even when they share a native language. So, if you're learning English, remember this. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to speak without an accent. You do not need to have flawless grammar. You just need to be willing to connect. You just need to be willing to try. You just need to be willing to show up and be present and care about the person you are communicating with. That is all that really matters. That is the secret that my sister discovered. And that is the secret that I want to share with you today. My sister's journey has taught me so much about love and language and life. It has taught me that home is not a place on a map. It is a feeling in your heart. It is the sense of belonging that comes from being with people who love you and accept you exactly as you are. It has taught me that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to act despite your fear. My sister was terrified when she boarded that plane to Texas. She had no idea what was waiting for her. She had no idea if Jake would be the man she thought he was. She had no idea if she would ever be able to adapt to a completely different culture. But she went anyway. She went because she believed in love. She went because she trusted her heart. She went because she knew that the biggest regrets in life come from the chances we did not take. And she was right. It has also taught me that resilience is not about never falling. It is about getting back up every single time. My sister faced countless challenges during her journey. She faced culture shock. She faced loneliness. She faced frustration and confusion and moments of complete despair. But she never gave up. She kept getting back up. She kept trying. She kept believing that things would get better. And they did. They got so much better than she ever could have imagined. It has taught me that growth is not comfortable. It is not easy. It is not smooth. Growth is messy and chaotic and painful. But it is also beautiful. It is the process of becoming who you are meant to be. It is the process of shedding your old self and embracing your new self. It is the process of expanding your heart and your mind and your soul. My sister grew so much during her journey. She grew from a scared, uncertain girl into a confident, capable, resilient woman. She grew from someone who could barely speak English into someone who could navigate two cultures with ease. She grew from someone who was afraid of the unknown into someone who embraced it with open arms. And she grew because she was willing to be uncomfortable. She was willing to be vulnerable. She was willing to face her fears and keep going anyway. That is the kind of growth that I want for you. That is the kind of growth that learning a language can bring. Not just the ability to speak English, but the ability to connect with new people, to understand new cultures, to see the world through new eyes. The ability to become more than you were before. The ability to find your own home, your own love, your own happiness. My sister found all of that. And she found it because she was willing to take a chance. She was willing to trust. She was willing to love. And she was willing to learn. So, as we reach the end of the story, I want you to ask yourself a question. What is the leap of faith that you need to take? What is the fear that is holding you back? What is the dream that you have been too scared to pursue? And then I want you to remember my sister. Remember how she took a chance on love and found everything she had ever wanted. Remember how she faced her fears and overcame every obstacle. Remember how she built a beautiful life in the most unlikely place. And then I want you to take your own leap of faith. It does not have to be as dramatic as moving to another country and marrying a cowboy. It can be something smaller. It can be starting that conversation with a native speaker. It can be joining an English conversation group. It can be watching videos like this and actually practicing out loud. It can be believing in yourself, even when it feels impossible. The important thing is to take the first step,
To start. To try.
to trust that you can do it, because you can. I believe in you. I believe that you can learn English. I believe that you can overcome any obstacle that stands in your way. I believe that you can build the life that you dream of. And I believe that love, in all its forms, will guide you along the way. So go out there and take your own leap of faith. Go out there and embrace the beautiful, messy, wonderful adventure of learning. Go out there and find your home, your love, your happiness. It is waiting for you, just like it was waiting for my sister. And when you find it, you will realize that it was worth every struggle, every moment of doubt, every tear shed along the way. Because the best things in life are never easy, but they're always worth it. Always. And that, my friend, is the final lesson of this story. Love does not need translation. Love transcends language. Love conquers all. Just ask my sister. Just ask her cowboy. Just ask the family they built together in the heart of Texas. They will tell you the same thing. They will tell you that love is the only language that truly matters. And they will tell you that it is always, always worth fighting for. So, thank you for joining me on this journey. Thank you for listening to my sister's story. Thank you for being willing to learn, to grow, to take your own leaps of faith. I am so proud of you. And I am so excited to see where your journey takes you. And here we are, at the very end of this incredible journey. But let me tell you something surprising. This is not really an ending. It is a beginning. It is the beginning of your own story, your own journey, your own transformation. Over the past 90 minutes, we have traveled together across oceans and cultures, through laughter and tears, through misunderstandings and moments of pure connection. We have watched my sister transform from a scared girl in Hanoi into a confident woman in Texas. We have witnessed love overcome every barrier that stood in its way. We have learned that language is not just about words. It is about heart. It is about courage. It is about the willingness to be vulnerable and the determination to keep going even when everything feels impossible. And now it is your turn. Your turn to take what you have learned and apply it to your own life. Your turn to stop being afraid and start being brave. Your turn to embrace the beautiful, messy, wonderful process of learning English and discovering who you are along the way. Think about my sister. She did not become fluent in English overnight. She did not wake up one morning miraculously speaking perfect sentences. She struggled. She made mistakes. She felt embarrassed and frustrated and hopeless. But she kept going. She kept trying. She kept believing that she could do it. And eventually she did. Not because she was special, but because she was persistent, because she was patient, because she was willing to learn from her mistakes and keep moving forward. And you can do the exact same thing. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to understand every word. You do not need to speak without an accent. You just need to be willing to try. You just need to be willing to show up. You just need to be willing to connect. Because that is what really matters. Connection. Understanding. Love. These are the things that make life meaningful. These are the things that make learning worthwhile. These are the things that will carry you through the difficult moments and help you celebrate the joyful ones. And here is the beautiful truth that my sister's story has shown us. When you open your heart to a new language, you are not just learning words. You are opening yourself to a whole new world, new people, new experiences, new possibilities. You are expanding your horizons and becoming more than you were before. You are growing. You are evolving. You are becoming the person you were always meant to be. So do not give up. Do not lose hope. Do not let fear stop you from pursuing your dreams. Keep listening. Keep reading.
Keep speaking.
Keep making mistakes and learning from them. Keep laughing at yourself and celebrating every tiny victory. Keep showing up for yourself and for the people who believe in you, because you are capable of so much more than you realize. You are strong. You are resilient. You are worthy of all the love and success and happiness that life has to offer. And you deserve to achieve everything you have ever dreamed of. My sister's story is proof that anything is possible. If she could leave everything behind, move to a completely different country, learn a new language, and build a beautiful life with a man from a completely different culture, then you can achieve your own dreams too. Whatever they are, wherever they take you, however impossible they seem right now. Just remember, love does not need translation. Courage does not need permission. And you do not need to be perfect to be amazing. You just need to be you. Authentic, vulnerable, brave, and beautiful you. And that is more than enough. That is everything. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to this story. Thank you for trusting me with your time and your attention. It means more to me than I can ever express. I hope this video has touched your heart, inspired your spirit, and given you the courage to keep going on your own journey. And I hope you will join me for the next one, because this is just the beginning.
There are so many more stories to tell.
So many more lessons to learn. So many more adventures to share. And I want you to be part of all of it. So here's my call to action. If you enjoyed this video, if it made you feel something, if it inspired you to keep going, please do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Ring that notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below and tell me your story. Tell me your struggles and your dreams and your hopes for the future. Tell me how this video made you feel. Tell me what you learned. Tell me what you're going to do next. Because I genuinely care about you. I genuinely want to see you succeed. I genuinely believe in you and your ability to achieve anything you set your mind to. So, let us continue this journey together. Let us build a community of learners, of dreamers, of people who refuse to give up. Let us support each other, encourage each other, and celebrate each other's victories. And let us remember, always, that love is the only language that truly matters. And that love is always, always worth fighting for. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for your courage, your persistence, and your beautiful heart. I will see you in the next video. Until then, keep going, keep growing, keep believing in yourself. Because I believe in you, and I know you can do this. Subscribe to the channel today so you do not miss the next inspiring story. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join me on this incredible journey of learning English through beautiful, heartfelt stories. See you in the next video.